Okay, TTArtisan 17 millimeter, 35 millimeter, and 50 millimeter. The 17 and the 35 are f1.4 aperture maximum aperture, and the 50 millimeter is f1.2 maximum aperture. So I'm just going to go over these real quick, and I do have just a couple quick things before I go any further. All the photos, the sample photos that I made with these lenses are in a separate gallery, so I'll pin a comment down below and also put it in the description, a link to the gallery, so you can go look at the photos for this, because I normally don't mix those in with my little videos that I do right here, because I don't honestly put a lot into these videos. It's just, you know, me talking for a few minutes about whatever subject I'm talking about, and then if you want to see the sample photos, it's much better to see them in the gallery anyway. You know, bigger and better quality. So anyway, the other thing I want to say about these lenses, I don't think these lenses are really meant to be a direct comparison to anything that Fuji would make, for example, or even Sigma or Tamron. I don't know the full line of lenses that TTArtisan has. I know they just recently announced an autofocus lens, and I believe that was for the Fuji mount. These are generally a much lower cost alternative and fully manual lenses. Now these, I'll just show you what I have here real quick. First of all, they do come in a really nice box. So here's the one for the 50 millimeter, and inside the box there's some literature and a nice foam padding there with a little bag that it comes in. So each of them has the same thing there. So here's all three of them, just so if you care about boxes. I don't know, for some reason I like boxes, and these are actually really nice boxes. So if you care about what they come in, there you go. And just real quick, they all have metal lens caps. They have the marking for what they're for on the end of the lens caps. And these are metal. It looks like aluminum. I would assume they're aluminum. And they just screw onto the front threads of the lens. So what is this? This is the 17, I believe. So you would just have the lens, the cap screwed right onto the end of the lens. And a couple of these do come with a little snap-on. It's not the, let's see, I guess it's the 50 and the 35 come with these little snap-on lens caps. These are kind of like an old Nikon style, if you want to think of it that way. They're kind of similar, you know, just pinch caps. You pinch here in the middle. So the only thing is, you can't, I've seen someone try this before. Like this is the one for the 50 millimeter. It doesn't, if you have the lens hood on there, and by the way, a couple of them do come with lens hoods. This is the lens hood right here. The cap won't go on with the lens hood on. I'm not sure why it's really made that way, but well, I don't know. It looks like it's going to go on, but not really. It does hold a little bit. It just seems like to me you have to have the lens hood removed before you can really put the cap on. So let's go over these real quick. So this is start with the smaller one. 17 millimeter f1.4, and that's in a full frame equivalent. That'd be like a 25.5 millimeter and a f2.1 aperture as far as the depth of field goes. So this is the 17. And by the way, I'm recording this with my Nikon Z7 II. It's in auto area, autofocus, face detect is turned off, so I'm just letting it select whatever's closest, so I can do this more easily, so it doesn't keep trying to lock onto my face. So this is the 17 millimeter f1.4. Let's take the rear cap off, and it's fully metal. The whole lens is metal, and it's got some weight to it, and it feels built really well. Let me open up that aperture. The aperture control actually is on the end of the lens, down here, and the focus ring is closest to the body, which is a little different than a lot of other lenses. Not really sure why it's that way, but that's the way it is on all three of them. So aperture control out here on the end, and these do click. These are clickable. And again, the focus control focus ring is back here, closest to the body. And nice metal mount. And for the price, I didn't write down the prices. I think the 35 actually was the most expensive, and it's only like $115 or so. And this is the 17. Of course, they all come with lens caps, rear lens cap. So the 35 is the one I actually have on my Fuji X-H2. And again, this one does come with a little lens hood, so you can put that on there if you want. And it comes with a tiny lens cap, but again, this cap doesn't really seem to stay on there when you have the lens hood on. So if you want the cap on, take the lens hood off, and it's just a screw-on lens hood. And I've got the small rig grip on here. It's more of a L grip, whatever. L grip, what do they call that now? It's an L, but I have the vertical piece removed because I'm not going to use it like that. So I think I got the Argus Swiss. Cat's coming over here. It's made so you can use it on Argus Swiss, but of course it's got all the mounts on there. So if you see the camera looks a little bigger than it normally would be, it is because I have that. So anyway, back to the lens. This is the 35. That's probably my favorite one. 35 1.4, 35 millimeter f1.4. Again, focus control is in the back, closest to the camera, and the aperture. There's Fred. Come on, Fred. I'm busy here. So this is f1.4 up to f16 as far as how that one's marked, and the 17 millimeter is 1.4 up to f16, and the 50 same thing. Well, actually the 50 is 1.2. We'll get to that in just a second. So I'm just going to let you look at them. Of course, you can look at these. I've got some better pictures of them on my website, and you can look at them. Various websites that sell these lenses. You can look at them online, get a better view of them. And this is the 50 millimeter f1.2. So that, again, that's like a 75 millimeter 1.8 aperture equivalent. So 1.8 as far as full frame equivalent depth of field, but it's 1.2 for the aperture on this lens, which is an APS-C lens. Let me open up the aperture all the way. And so 1.2 for the light collection, the aperture on the APS-C, but as far as the equivalent depth of field on a full frame, if you want to try to get an idea of that, this is a 75, it'd be like an equivalent to a 75 millimeter f1.8. Again, this is, all three of them, they definitely have some weight to them, and they are definitely all metal, and all three of them have clickable apertures. You see this one also has couple little tabs on the side here where you can put your finger on there and move it for the aperture control. And again, the aperture out at the end of the lens, and the focus ring is back here. Now, as far as the optical quality for these, back to the price real quick. I think the 17 and the 50 are a little under $100 US dollars. So that's probably 3 times less or 4 times less, depending on the lens you're talking about, than a lot of other lenses. Now, these are prime lenses equivalent. So let's say the Sigma 56 millimeter f1.4 lens, for example. This is a 50, so that would be the most equivalent to that lens, the Sigma lens. But this is a 1.2 aperture, and it's a 56 or a 50 instead of 56, so 75 instead of an 85 millimeter equivalent. But the Sigma lens is a little over $400 on sale, and this one again is like under $100. And it's what you would expect, for these lenses. These are fully manual. There's no electronic communication between the camera. You can set in the Fuji cameras, you can set in the menu, what do they call that? I'll tell you real quick. There's a setting you can set in here, which I always forget to change when I change the lenses, mount adapter setting. And what that does is it lets you assign a name to it, and this all shows up in your metadata, you know, your XF or whatever. So when you're looking at the Adobe Lightroom, whatever editing software you use, when you look at the information for that photo, you'll see whatever name you give it here. So I just called it TTArtisan 17 millimeter. And then it lets you set the focal length of that lens and, you know, just basically give it a name. So since there's no communication between the lens and the camera, that makes it more convenient if you remember to switch it, which I always forget. So pictures I've taken with the 50 millimeter lens actually have, you know, the metadata that shows up as the TTArtisan 17 millimeter. That's how I had it labeled in here. And I just forgot to change it. It doesn't really matter, you know, it's not going to affect the photos, obviously. It's just a label. It's just how it shows up in the data on the photo. But you can do that. You can, well, actually, I believe the focal length setting, I think, has something to do with the in-body image stabilization, so it helps it to stabilize it more correctly. So since the X-H2 does have image stabilization in the body, it is going to stabilize all the pictures you take with these manual lenses. But again, these are fully manual, no autofocus, no communication between the camera and the lens, so it doesn't know what aperture you're using. You know, since the camera has a light meter, obviously you're seeing the exposure in your camera, and you can just adjust your exposure accordingly. So, you know, you'll be in manual mode, you'll be in manual focus, so you'll be adjusting your aperture on the lens, shutter speed on the body, and also adjusting your ISO on the body. There's a couple different ways you can use auto ISO with the camera. The Fuji, for example, I think it gives you, there's a way to do sort of exposure compensation when you're using auto ISO on here. For me, it was just a little too complicated because you had to assign it to a button. And it was just easier just to, you know, hit the ISO button up here on top and then change your ISO manually that way. I know some people complain since the X-H2 and the X-H2S, I guess these buttons are not you can't click these buttons in. I guess in the past you used to be able to click it in and then spin it to change the ISO. Instead of pressing a button and then, you know, changing the ISO that way. I imagine Fuji will probably change that. So anyway, that's just a shooting manual thing. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not the best in the world at manual focusing. So it can be a little bit of challenge for me to manual focus. Even using focus peaking, and tried all the other different split prism or whatever, the other manual focus assist that Fuji offers. But sometimes I would find that the focus peaking was better, and sometimes I'd find just like the magnified view. You can press the display button and go between, like, seeing the full screen of the image you're shooting, and or between having a large box for the image and then off to the right, you know, wherever your focus point is, like it's like a 100% magnified view of whatever you're shooting there, and then you can, you know, adjust the focus that way, and just to, you know, see if it looks like it's in focus, you know, visibly. But in general, it's for me, it's I'm not the best at autofocusing, but I would say, let me get back to, because I think I totally skipped over image quality. I think it's what you would expect out of a $100 lens, or about $120 lens for the 35 millimeter. Wide open, you know, at f1.2 on the 50 or 1.4 on the 17 or 35. It is kind of soft, but, you know, there are some lenses that are a lot more expensive that are soft, wide open also. I remember the 50 millimeter Nikon f1.4D lens, you know, it was the one, I believe it was the one that was had the screw in it, you know, screw drive for the focus, where it needed the focus motor in the body, and a little pin sticks out basically and turns the screw in the lens to focus. But I remember that one was not real sharp, wide open. And I think the Fuji 56 millimeter 1.2, the original, was not super sharp, wide open. But it would be sharper than these. But I just would say that, again, you know, for around $100, it's about what you'd expect, but it's better than what you would expect also. You know, once you start stopping the lenses down f2, you know, and further up, depending on what you're shooting, and making sure you get it in focus correctly. I found that, you know, you can make some really nice photos with these. So as far as who these lenses would be for, I think if you just enjoy shooting manual focus and totally manual exposure, you know, setting the ISO, aperture, and shutter speed fully manually, well, these could be for you. And obviously, if you don't have a budget for those other ones, you know, these could be for you. The other thing would be, you know, if you're kind of newer to photography and you want to learn the exposure triangle, you know, ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and just learn the basics of photography. And, you know, these could be you know, like a really low cost option to get into that, you know, and learn how to expose properly just by doing it all manually. You know, and if it's nothing more than just, you know, learning exposure, that's, you know, it could be something as simple as that. So, you know, if you have a low budget, you just like using manual lenses, or you're just kind of using it to get familiar with shooting manually, these could be a real nice low cost option to get into that without, you know, spending a lot of money and then having to worry about, you know, like, I spent $500 in that lens, and, you know, and then you lose some money trying to sell it later on if you don't really want to keep it, you know, that sort of thing. So anyway, that's really all I've got for these lenses. Again, you know, that it can be kind of fun to shoot manually, fully manually. You know, it just depends on what you like. But if you're watching this video, then you probably are interested in shooting manually. So, and the Fuji, you know, gives you a lot of control over that. You know, a lot of assists. You know, with the focus, you know, checking focus, make sure exposure, you know, focus is correct, and setting exposure is a lot easier on Fuji sometimes compared to some other cameras. But yeah, there you go. So you could have all three of these lenses for like right around $280, all three of them, you know, $280 US. So anyway, I'll shut up about it, and I think, let's see, we're at about 12 minutes, is it right? I'm watching my phone here. So I'm using, one thing just real quick, one thing I noticed that Fuji and Olympus can't do, is totally off topic, but I mentioned this in one of my other Fuji videos. When you control the camera with the phone and stream the display, so if you want to be able to see what you're doing here, you know, like I'm just using the smartphone app, the SnapBridge app, as a kind of like an external monitor. I can see what I'm doing. I see if I'm in frame, and when I hold something up, I know it's, you know, like it's right there in the center of the frame, whatever, you know. And it's shooting 4K 60 frames a second. But the thing that's a little aggravating with Fuji, and Olympus did this also, I can't remember if it was this way on the Panasonic cameras they had, like the GH5 or G9. Panasonic and Olympus and Fuji for sure, if you try to stream live from the camera, you know, and use the remote control of the camera, and seeing it live on your phone, it'll only shoot at 1080p. You know, 1080 is a max resolution you can get for a video. It won't shoot in 4K. I think it may be something related to the, I don't know if it's processing or what it is, or the stream going to the phone, but this, sure, you know, I did a little check before I recorded this video, and sure enough, when I did that little sample recording, doing it just this way, you know, recording with the stream going to the phone so I can watch what I'm doing, it was shooting 4K 60. So I wish Fuji would somehow change. I don't know if it's a hardware limitation or what the issue is there, but it is a little aggravating. So anyway, go check my website. There's no advertising on my website at all. It's just totally tons of photos. That's all it is. Just a lot of pictures there. A lot of different photo galleries. There's, you know, photography gear galleries, you know, sample photos from different lenses, different cameras, all kinds of different cameras that I've owned and had intended to own longer term. Some I didn't keep very long for various reasons, and some I kept a lot longer, like the Z7 I kept over 3 years, the original Z7. Now I've got a Z7 II, but I've also got the X-H2 and I've got a little Nikon ZFC, which is more for just a small travel work camera if I need one. Yeah, it's all just photos. You know, there's no advertiser trying to sell anything on my website. So I hope you go enjoy that. There's a lot of vacation photo galleries. You know, they're as artsy as possible. They're not just simple photo snaps of vacation. So a lot of, you know, national parks and some overseas stuff. Not too much yet, but anyway, that's that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.